Chapter 1. The Call My Name is Benjamin Cowburn. Though in the shadows of the war that would consume us all, I became known as Benoit, or sometimes Germain, a name that felt like a borrowed skin, ill-fitting at first, but soon as natural as my own. Born in the smoky industrial heart of Lancashire in 1909, I was just a boy of 8 when my parents uprooted us to Paris, chasing dreams of a brighter life across the Channel. The city of light swallowed me whole. The cacophony of horse-drawn carriages clattering over cobblestones, the scent of fresh baguettes mingling with the Seine's muddy breath, the endless chatter in a language that twisted my tongue until it learned to dance. I attended a British school in Boulogne-sur-Seine, where the teachers drilled us in the Queen's English. But it was the Lycée Français de Londres that truly sharpened my mind, or so they said. Engineering called to me next, electrical circuits, and the hum of machinery, leading me to work for Foster Wheeler, that American giant, building distillation plants for oil refineries scattered like veins across France. Life was steady, predictable, blueprints by day, absinthe by night in Montparnasse cafes, where artists and exiles spun tailies that made my engineer's soul itch for something more. But then came 1939, and the world cracked open like a faulty valve under pressure. Hitler's shadow fell over Europe, and France, my France, buckled. I watched from afar at first, safe in my expatriate bubble, as the Wehrmacht rolled through the Ardennes like a steel tide. The fall of Paris in June 1940 hit me like a wrench to the gut. I was in England by then, having fled the chaos with a suitcase of regrets and a one-way ticket on the last boat from Le Havre. The BBC crackled with de Gaulle's voice, defiant from his London exile, calling for resistance. La France a perdu une bataille, mais la France n'a pas perdu la guerre. I repeated those words to myself in the dim light of my rented room in Kensington, pounding my fist against the peeling wallpaper. Lost a battle, yes, but the war, no, not while men like me still drew breath. It started innocuously enough, as these things often do in the annals of secret histories. Early 1941, I was nursing a pint in a pub off Baker Street, Churchill's den of spies, though I didn't know it then, when a man in a rumpled suit slid onto the stool beside me. He wasn't much to look at. Mid-40s, balding pate gleaming under the low lamps, eyes like chipped flint. Cowburn, isn't it? The oil man from Paris. His voice was flat, East End accent cutting through the murmur of bombed-out veterans swapping war stories. I nodded warily, my hand tightening around the glass. How did he know me? We'd met once briefly at a lecture on industrial sabotage at some obscure engineering society. But this wasn't about valves or turbines. You're fluent in French, I hear, lived there half your life. It wasn't a question. He lit a cigarette, the match flaring briefly to illuminate a face etched with the weariness of too many late nights. Ever thought about putting that to use? Real use, I mean, not just piping crude for the frogs. My pulse quickened. The papers were full of whispers. Churchill's Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare, a shadowy outfit called SOE, Special Operations Executive, tasked with setting Europe ablaze from within. Sabotage, espionage, guerrilla tricks to bleed the Nazis dry. I'd read the rumors, dismissed them as pub talk, but here was this stranger offering a key to the door. I drained my pint, the bitter ale grounding me. What's the catch? He chuckled, a dry rasp. The catch is you might not come back. 50-50 odds, they say, but if you do, you'll have stories that make Hemingway blush. We talked for hours that night, or rather, he talked and I listened. He sketched the broad strokes. Agents parachuted into occupied territory, linking with resistance cells, blowing bridges, derailing trains, whispering intelligence back to London via crystal sets hidden in attics. No uniforms, no ranks, just you, a false identity, and the Gestapo one step behind. By closing time, I'd signed nothing, but my mind was made up. The next morning, I walked into an unmarked office on Baker Street, handed over my passport, and stepped into the abyss. Recruitment was a gauntlet of interviews, each more probing than the last. Psychologists poked at my soul like mechanics testing an engine. What would you do if a comrade betrayed you? How do you handle pain? I lied where I had to, told truths where it hurt. They tested my French, my knowledge of Paris back alleys, my ability to pick a lock with a hairpin. One assessor, a wiry Scotsman with a scar across his cheek, grilled me on tradecraft basics, dead drops, brush passes, the art of blending into a crowd. "You're short, stocky," he said, eyeing me up and down. I was 5'6" in my boots, built like a tugboat, with a blunt Lancashire manner that grated on posh officers. Good Jerrys overlook the unremarkable, but lose the off-color jokes. They'll mark you as English faster than a bad accent. By spring 1941, I was whisked away to Wanborough Manor, a sprawling Elizabethan pile in Surrey, shrouded in rhododendrons and secrecy. The finishing school, they called it, but it was more boot camp for ghosts. 60 of us in that first cohort, men and women from all walks, aristocrats, poets, factory hands, even a few with shady pre-war pasts. We arrived under cover of darkness, bundled into black Marias that rattled over bomb-cratered roads. The manor loomed like a forgotten duke's folly, its leaded windows glowing faintly against the blackout. Inside, the air smelled of damp stone and pipe tobacco, mingled with the faint tang of fear sweat from those who'd come before. Training began at dawn, a brutal rhythm designed to forge civilians into saboteurs. Physical conditioning first. Cross-country runs through dripping woods, where brambles tore at our legs like eager fingers. I remember the first route march, 20 miles with a 60-pound pack, rifle, explosives, rations, rain lashing our faces like God's own whip. My lungs burned, thighs screamed, but I pushed on, cursing under my breath in a mix of English and French. "Med, this is no refinery stroll," I muttered to the man beside me, a lanky Oxford don named Tommy who later washed out for cracking under interrogation. We learned to kill quietly, garrote wires that bit into palms, Fairbairn and Sykes daggers that slipped between ribs. One instructor, a former cop from Hong Kong, demonstrated on a straw dummy, his voice a monotone litany. "Strike here for the kidney, twist for the heart, no noise, no mercy." Then came the tradecraft, the real sorcery. We practiced invisible ink, recipes involving aspirin dissolved in urine, messages that bloomed under heat like guilty secrets. Ciphers were child's play compared to the one-time pads, those grids of random numbers that turned gossip into gold for Bletchley Park. I spent nights hunched over a desk in the manor's library, formerly stuffed with leather-bound tomes, now littered with codebooks and stubbed-out Gauloises. My fingers cramped from tapping out Morse on battered receivers, the dots and dashes echoing in my skull long after lights out. "Speed is life," our wireless trainer barked, a woman with a voice like gravel. "The Jerrys triangulate in minutes, miss a beat and you're meat." Sabotage was where the thrill ignited. In the cellars, we handled plastic explosives. Composition C, they called it, a putty that molded like dough but packed the punch of a howitzer shell. I learned to wire detonators, set time pencils that fizzled like birthday fuses, calculate blast radii with the precision of my engineering days. One exercise had us blowing a mock railway line in the manor's grounds, creeping through fog-shrouded fields, avoiding German patrols, our own instructors with painted faces and Sten guns. My team, me, a fiery Welsh girl named Marie, and a silent Belgian called Jacques, succeeded on the third try, the dummy charges thumping satisfactorily as we scarpered into the underbrush. But failure strung. Jacques triggered a tripwire, died in a hail of blanks, and spent the night digging latrines as punishment. Interrogation resistance was the darkest art, a psychological forge that left scars no blade could match. They called it the cooler, a stone outbuilding where reality bent. Stripped to our vests, hands bound, we'd face Gestapo officers, SOE men in ill-fitting SS uniforms, barking questions in guttural German. Sleep deprivation, bright lights, the works. On my turn, they waterboarded me with a rag and bucket, the cloth clogging my throat as I gasped for air, convinced my lungs would burst. "Where's your drop zone? Who's your contact?" the interrogator snarled, his breath hot with stale coffee. I held out for hours, reciting engineering tables in my head, ohms, volts, amps, until they called time. Not everyone did. A chap from Liverpool broke in 20 minutes, spilling fictional beans. "Better here than in Fresnes," the instructor consoled him. Fresnes, the Paris prison where real agents rotted, tortured with rubber hoses and pliers. Nights at Wanborough were for the soul, if we had any left. We'd gather in the common room, a fire crackling in the grate, swapping tailies over smuggled brandy. Marie spoke of her farm in Normandy, lost to the Boches. Jack of a brother shot in 40. I told my off-color stories, crude yarns from Paris latrines that drew laughs and blushes, masking the knot in my chest. Doubt crept in like fog off the Thames. Was I mad, leaving a safe job for this? But then I'd think of Paris under the swastika, the tricolour furled in shame, and the fire reignited. Churchill's words echoed, "Set Europe ablaze." I wanted to be the spark. By late spring, assessments loomed. Paramilitary exams, marksmanship on the range, where my steady hand from blueprint drafting dropped 8 out of 10 rounds into a silhouette's chest at 200 yards. Security tests. Plant false clues, see if we spotted the tail. Mine passed barely after I lost a briefcase in Victoria Station and retrieved it from a dead drop without a hitch. The final hurdle. A mock mission into enemy, London, forging papers, stealing a bicycle, rendezvousing at a Lyons corner house without drawing eyes. I succeeded, heart hammering as a bobby eyed my forged ID, but waved me through with a grunt. Graduation came quietly, no fanfare. A handshake from the co, a dossier stamped, passed for operations. My code name, Benoit, after some forgotten saint of endurance. They issued my kit. Silk maps printed on handkerchiefs, escape aids sewn into collars, hacksaw blades, benzedrine tablets for the long hauls, and a poison ampule, cyanide-laced, for the endgame. If they catch you, the quartermaster said flatly, use it. Don't let them break you. I pocketed it, the glass cool against my thigh, a promise I prayed never to keep. As June 1941 dawned, the Whitley bomber awaited at a secret airfield in Suffolk. My first mission. Parachute into Vichy, France, link with contacts, scout targets near Châteauroux. The crew strapped me in, the harness biting into my shoulders as the props whined to life. 6 of us that night, me, Georges Bégaret the wireless man, Max Hymans of the Resistance, and 3 greenhorns whose names blur now in memory. The plane lumbered into the sky, England falling away beneath us like a discarded blueprint. I peered through the porthole at the blackout below, the channel a black mirror reflecting my fears. What if the drop missed? What if the reception committee failed? The dispatcher, a burly sergeant, clapped my shoulder. Good luck, sir. Give 'em hell, the red light blinked. Green, go. The trapdoor yawned, wind howling like banshees. I tumbled into the void, the chute blooming above me like a reluctant flower. Earth rushed up, fields, hedges, a distant church spire under moonlight. Impact jarred my bones, rolling me into damp furrows that smelled of turned earth and freedom. I cut the lines, buried the silk, and crouched, pistol drawn, ears straining. Footsteps, soft, hesitant. Benoit, a whisper in French. Hymans, his face pale as cheese in the gloom. We'd made it. But as we melted into the night, linking arms toward Châteauroux, I knew the real test had just begun. The Gestapo's web stretched wide, and I was the fly, wings still drying. Little did I know, that first step would lead to 4 missions, networks forged in fire, locomotives reduced to scrap, and close calls that would haunt my dreams for decades. But in that moment, stumbling through French fields with the taste of cordite on my tongue, I felt alive. Europe waited to burn, and I carried the match. Chapter 2, Forging the Chain. The moon hung low over the Berry countryside like a guilty lantern, casting silvery veins across the wheat fields that whispered secrets to the wind. It was the early hours of 9 June 1941, and I, Benoit now, not Ben, crouched in the dew-soaked furrows, my heart a piston hammering against my ribs. The parachute drop had been textbook. A soft landing in a meadow near Mairie-sur-Cher, the silk canopy billowing like a ghost before I buried it under quick spadework with my entrenching tool. Hymans had materialized from the hedgerows like a farmhand apparition, his face smeared with soil, eyes darting for the telltale glint of German patrols. We'd gathered the scattered containers, those plywood crates thudding down like reluctant rain, dragging them into a thicket where branches clawed at our sleeves like suspicious fingers. Inside, wireless sets, crystal transmitters fragile as hope, plastic explosive bricks that smelled faintly of almonds, and gold sovereigns for buying silence or loyalty, whichever came cheaper. 3 kilometers to the safe house, Hymans murmured, his breath fogging in the chill. He was a wiry Parisian, code name Max, with a resistance pedigree that traced back to the first whispers of defiance in 40. We'd met in training, bonded over shared cigarettes and cynicism, but now, in the flesh of occupied France, he was my lifeline. I nodded, slinging a container over my shoulder, the weight a grim reminder that every step carried the Empire's gamble on our backs. The path wound through bocage, those tangled Norman hedges that hid lovers and lovers of trouble alike, our boots sucking at the mud like reluctant lovers. Owls hooted mockery from the treetops, and once, a distant rumble. A troop truck on the N20, its headlights slicing the dark like scalpels. We froze, hearts in throats, until the growl faded toward Burges. Close, too close for poetry. The safe house was a squat farmhouse on the outskirts of Châteauroux, its thatch roof sagging like an old man's shoulders, windows shuttered against prying eyes. The owner, a one-legged veteran of Verdun named Pierre Duval, greeted us with a lantern's glow and a flask of Calvados that burned like liquid fire down my gullet. "Bienvenue les garçons," he rasped, his stump propped on a stool, eyes sharp as bayonets despite the years. Duval was our cutout, a node in the nascent network we'd codename Salesman, a circuit for smuggling agents, supplies, and sabotage into the Indre department, that rural heartland where Vichy collaboration festered like an untreated wound. Over black bread and ersatz coffee, Hymans sketched the brief: link with local cells, scout oil depots at La Martinerie, prepare for arms drops. My role, the engineer-saboteur turning blueprints into booms. But first, the forge. Recruiting the chain of couriers, forgers, and fixers who would keep the Gestapo guessing. Dawn broke grey and grudging, the sun a reluctant witness as we slipped into Châteauroux proper. The town slumbered under occupation's pall. Tricolor flags limp beside swastikas on the prefecture, German sentries in Feldgrau idling by the station, their Mausers slung like afterthoughts. I adopted my cover, Germain, a Belgian refugee mechanic fleeing the Flemish front, papers forged in Baker Street's cellars bearing stamps that fooled all but the eagle-eyed. My wool suit itched, the fedora a shield for my Lancashire bluntness, and I practiced my limp, a subtle hitch from a fictional shrapnel kiss. Hymans peeled off toward the market square, his task the wireless link-up with London. Mine the human web. First contact, Marie Therese, a seamstress in her 40s with hands calloused from needle and nerve. Her shop on Rue Victor Hugo reeked of camphor and conspiracy, bolts of cloth veiling a back room where resistance pamphlets yellowed like old teeth. She knew me by a phrase: "The nightingale sings at midnight," I countered with, "but the fox hunts by dawn." Her eyes, crow's feet framing suspicion, softened fractionally. Duval sent word. Sit, over tisane that tasted of boiled weeds, she spilled the local ledger. A schoolteacher in Ardence who mapped rail lines, a baker in Le Poinçonnet who overheard Wehrmacht gossip, a priest in Écueillé who heard confessions and confessions of collaboration. But the chain had fractures, Vichy Millis sniffing too close, a baker's son turned informant for a crust. "Trust is a luxury," she warned, her voice a threadbare whisper. "We lost 2 last month to a raid in Dales. Hanged from meat hooks in the barracks." I nodded, the weight of it settling like lead in my gut. Recruitment wasn't a handshake, it was a pact with the devil's own dice. My first mark. Etienne, the schoolteacher, a bespectacled idealist with ink-stained fingers, and a map of the Indre etched in his mind. We met in the crypt of St. André's, the air thick with incense and damp stone, where echoes swallowed indiscretions. "The railways are veins," he said, unrolling a pilfered schedule under votive candles flicker. From Châteauroux to Vierzon, laden with bauxite for the Reich's aluminum mills, derail 1 and the artery clots. His passion was fire, but his hands trembled, father to 3, wife in a factory stitching Luftwaffe parachutes. I pressed a sovereign into his palm, the gold cool as betrayal. "For the children, and for the chain." He pocketed it, resolve hardening like setting concrete, one link forged, but tension coiled like a spring. By midday, paranoia gnawed. A stranger in the cafe, nursing a pastis, his gaze lingering on my false limp. Gestapo, Millis, or just a weary Frenchman dreaming of 39. I slipped out the back, heart racing, cycling to the baker's on a borrowed velo that rattled like loose teeth. Monsieur Lefebvre was a bear of a man, flour-dusted and foul-mouthed, his oven a front for baking bombs, literally once we smuggled in primers. Heard the Boches are quartering troops at the Casson, he grunted, kneading dough that hid microfilm. Tanks for the Atlantic Wall, they say, but whispers of invasion, allies in the West. I fed him the line. Disinformation from London to stoke the fire without scorching the pot. In truth, Barbarossa had just launched, tying Hitler's hands eastwards, but morale was oxygen. Soon, I lied, the word bitter as chicory. He laughed, a bellow that shook the rafters, and slipped me a loaf with a hollowed core. Inside, a compass and escape routes scrawled on rice paper. Afternoons blurred into a rhythm of shadows. Dead drops in hollow oaks, brush passes in crowded markets where housewives haggled over turnips, signals via laundry lines, white sheet for safe, red for compromised. I memorized faces, phrases, the subtle tells of deceit, a averted eye, a too-quick smile. One night, under a harvest moon, we tested the chain, a dummy message from me to Etienne via refineries, timed to the minute. It flowed smooth as cognac, but the lag at the baker's, 5 minutes, meant a tail could close the noose. Tighten it, I urged in the farmhouse gloom, Duval's pipe smoke curling like omens. Hyman's, tapping Morse in the loft, nodded grimly. His set, a B2 in a suitcase disguised as a gramophone, hummed with static ghosts. London calling, Authenticator Zulu. Proceed. The first spark came a week in, sweltering under July's yoke. Target, a spur line at La Chapelle Saint Laurent, ferrying fuel drums to the Luftwaffe fields near Orly. Etienne's maps pinpointed the weakest link, a marshalling yard flanked by woods, guarded by a single sentry post. We assembled the team, me, Hymans for lookout, Lefebvre with his crowbar sole, and a farm boy named Paul, barely 18, whose eagerness masked terror. Dawn patrol, I scouted on foot, posing as a poacher, notebook sketching gradients under the guise of birdwatching. The yard slept, 6 tankers gleaming like silver bullets, the air heavy with petrol's bite. Guards. 2 rotating, Mauser 98 KS at rest. Viable. Planning in the crypt, candle wax pooling like blood, composition C molded into limpet mines, time pencils fizzing at 4 hours, detonators wired with my engineer's precision. Ohms checked twice, no shorts. Blast radius 20 meters, I calculated, voice low. Shrapnel shreds the undercarriage, fire does the rest. Paul paled, but Lefebvre clapped his back. Think of your sister in the factory, boy. This frees her hands. We moved at midnight, the 11th, stars pricked like shrapnel wounds. Bocage swallowed us, then the tree line's edge. Hymans whistled, a nightjar's trill. Clear, the creep was agony. Belly down, elbows gouging earth, the sentry's cigarette ember a baleful eye 50 yards off. I led, pack heavy with death, sweat stinging my eyes. 30 yards, 20. The first tanker loomed, valves weeping condensate. I pressed the putty to the axle box, the pencil's acid eating through to ignite, fizz, seal, prey. Paul fumbled his, a curse bitten back. Lefebvre growled correction. 4 down, hearts thundering like the Paris Express. Then footsteps, a patrol. No, the sentry stretching, torch beam sweeping lazy. We flattened, clods in our mouths, breath held till lungs ached. The light passed. 5, 6. Wired. Retreating, Paul's boot caught a root, snapped like a neck breaking. We froze, silence. Then eternity later, the bloom. A whoomp that shook the ground, orange tongues licking the night, secondary blasts chaining like dominoes. Alarms wailed, shadows scrambling. We scarpered, adrenaline a drug, collapsing in a ditch 2 miles hence, laughter hysterical, tears salt on cheeks. London's reply crackled next eve. Well done, fuel denied, Maury. Elation short as a time fuse. But the chain strained. Whispers of a leak, Marie Therese's shop raided, her alibi thin. Was it the baker's son, Etienne's wife? Interrogations in the prefecture, screams echoing at night. I doubled ciphers, rotated drops, but sleep fled, chased by visions of Fresnes cells. One dawn, cycling back from a meet, a black Citroën-tailed Millis, eagle eyes on my plates. I ditched the bike in an alley, vaulted a wall into a tannery's stink, hid amid hides till dusk. Close, the noose tightened. August brought escalation. Arms dropped near Ardent's, 3 canisters, Wellingtons and Stens tumbling from the Dakota's belly, reception by torch signals in Morse. Paul caught a crate solo, grinning like a fool till a sprained wrist sidelined him. We armed the cells, pistols for couriers, grenades for the bold. My second hit, the refinery spur at La Martinerie, bauxite silos fat for sabotage, but intel soured, reinforced guards post our last coup. Etienne's contact, a rail clerk, vanished, presumed Gestapo bait. We aborted, frustration acid in my veins. Then the priest's warning, a Vichy purge, Millis sweeping villages for terrorists. Duval's farm suspect, too many late visitors. We dispersed, Hyman's to a hayloft wireless, me to a widow's attic in La Poinsonnet, her silence bought with gold and gratitude. Nights blurred, encoding reports, salesman operational. 6 tankers destroyed. Request explosives, decoding orders, target Troy's engines, evade net. Tension peaked 15 August, a brush pass gone wrong. Marie Therese, pale as milk, passed a bundle microfilm of troop movements, but her eyes screamed trap. They're closing, she hissed. The baker sang. Lefebvre, no, his son, tortured with electrodes, betrayal's sting. We struck back. Midnight raid on a supply dump in Ecuele, Paul's debut with the Sten, nerves steeling under fire. Incendiaries bloomed, crates of ammo cooking off like fireworks. Escape narrow, bullets zipping hedges, a graze on Hyman's arm. Patched in the crypt, we toasted with Duval's last Calvados, to the chain, but cracks spidered. London urged extraction, my brief extended, scout Troyes for the next circuit. September's harvest masked our flight north, trains dodged, lorries hitched under false bottoms. Troyes welcomed with autumn chill, the Seine's mist veiling the medieval spires now patrolled by felgendarmerie. New safe house, a bookseller's flat above a shop redolent of pulp and peril. Contacts here fiercer, Virginia Hall's shadow loomed, that one-legged American legend coordinating from the hills, her radio whispers guiding our steps. But that's another chain, my task. The locomotive sheds, heart of the supply line to the channel. Etienne's maps traveled with me, inked updates from Châteauroux. The yard was a beast, 20 engines, behemoth snoring steam, guards tripled after Allied raids. I infiltrated as a fireman, cover story woven tight, slipping in at shift change, overalls grease black, blueprints memorized, boilers vulnerable, axles Achilles' heels. Over weeks, the plan coalesced. Limpet the lot, time synced for dawn chaos. Team, locals vetted by Virginia's net, a welder named Rayerol, a nurse for alibis, rehearsals in cellars, shadows dancing on walls. Execution, 3 October, fog thick as soup. We ghosted in heart sturges, first mindset fizz, second, third, whispers sweat, the clang of a dropped tool echoing like doom, 6 down, the shed's a powder keg, retreat, clean, till Rayerol tripped an alarm. Shouts, torches, Wehrmacht boots pounding. Sten fire cracked, Paul's burst dropping a shadow. We bolted, the yard erupting behind, blasts chaining, boilers bursting like thunder gods, 6 engines twisted scrap under flames that lit the Orb Valley. Chaos, sirens, troops scrambling blind. We melted into the mist, laughter choked with relief. London's praise, magnificent, Reich crippled. But cost, Rayerol winged, captured, his screams haunting dreams. The chain held barely. Extraction loomed via Pyrenees, but duty chained me. 4 missions beckoned, each a forge hotter than the last. In Troy's embers, I glimpsed the war's face, not glory, but grind, betrayal's bite, the stubborn spark that refused to gutter. Europe burned, and I fanned the flames, one link at a time. Chapter 3, Trials of the Flame, the Pyrenees loomed like jagged teeth gnashing at the stars. A black wall of rock and retribution that separated freedom from the Gestapo's grasp. It was February 1942, and I, Benoit, the ghost in the machine, trudged through snowdrifts that clawed at my calves, each step a gamble with frostbite and frontier guards. Behind me lay the wreckage of my first mission. The salesman's circuit half-forged, whispers of betrayal from Mathilde Carré, The cat, they called her, echoing like a Judas kiss. I'd crossed from Vichy into occupied Paris in October, linking with Pierre de Vaumécourt's early resistance threads, only to unravel when Carré, that double-edged blade of a woman, sold secrets to the abouer for a velvet glove. Her web-snared contacts I'd barely touched, safe houses compromised, couriers vanishing into Avenue Fox Moor. Hymans and I had scattered like ash, me holing up in a lion's attic courtesy of Virginia Hall, that iron-willed American with the prosthetic leg, her limp no match for her resolve. "Keep moving, Ben," she'd urged, her voice a steady current in the blackout. "The cat's claws are long, but Paris is longer." The escape was a fever dream of peril, forged papers as a Flemish trucker, hitching rides on coal lorries that belched smoke like dying dragons, then the border dash under moonless skies. Vaumécourt's brother Philippe greased palms in Limoges for guides, Basque smugglers with eyes like flint and hearts bought with sovereigns. We crossed at night, 8 souls in a ragged line. Me, a downed RAF pilot named Jenkins, 2 Jewish families fleeing the roundups. The climb started at Col de la Cruzette, wind howling dirges through pine needles that whipped our faces raw. My boots, caked in mud from Indre fields, slipped on icy scree. Once, I dangled over a ravine, fingers numb on a route that tasted of earth and eternity. "Allez, Anglais," a guide hissed, hauling me up with a goat herder's grip. Dawn found us in Andorra's neutral mist, but Spain's phalangists waited. Interrogations in barbed wire camps near Figueres, where I spun tales of being a stranded engineer, my cover holding by the thread of a shared Gauloise with a sympathetic guard. Gibraltar by March, then a boat to Blighty, debrief at Baker Street, a blur of maps and recriminations. Carrés rolled up half the Paris nets, the colonel growled, his mustache twitching like a fuse, but you got out clean. Salesman's intel on those oil depots, priceless. I nodded, the Pyrenees ache still in my bones, but the fire burned hotter. Awards came quiet, a mention in dispatches, whispers of the MC later. Rest. A week in a Surrey cottage, fishing the Thames for trout that tasted of peace, but dreams dragged me back, Hyman's face in the shadows, Carré's laugh like breaking glass. By May, the call came. Second mission, codename still Benoit, but with a new edge. "Lion's your hub," they said. "Stir the pot, scout the lines, and watch your back, no more cats." The Whitley droned south on 1 June 1942, props chewing the night over the Bay of Biscay. My jump partner, Edward Wilkinson, code Alex, a lanky solicitor from Leeds with a knack for codes, but nerves like piano wire. Containers slung below, our kit lighter this time, Sten's submachine guns oiled against the damp, more gold for the greedy. The dispatcher grinned through tobacco teeth. "Soft landing, lads, give the frogs hell." Green light. We tumbled into the void, chutes snapping open like reluctant sails, but fate's a cruel mechanic. Crosswinds shoved us 65 kilometers off, dumping us in a hayfield near Tarbes, the Pyrenees mocking us from afar. I hit hard, rolling into furrows that reeked of manure and mountain air, Wilkinson sprawling nearby with a twisted ankle. "Mad," he gasped, but we buried the silk quick, cached the gear in a sheepfold, and limped toward a landmark church spire piercing the dawn. Luck's thin thread, a farmer's wife, eyes wide as saucers at our khaki, fed us bread and hid us till dusk. Word reached Virginia Hall via courier, her network, Heckler, a web of couriers snaking from the Massif Central. 2 days later, a trucker with a false bottom smuggled us to Lyon, that crucible of resistance where the Rhone whispered secrets to the Seine. Virginia met us in a bistro off Rue du Plat, her felt hat shadowing a face etched with vigilance. "You're late, but alive," she said, sliding croissants across a scarred table. "The city's crawling, Kiefer's boys from Avenue Foch, sniffing for Jews and saboteurs." Over coffee bitter as defeat, she sketched the brief. Link with Denny's rake, a wireless wizard with a flair for disguises, scout rail junctions for bomber command, seed sabotage in factories churning for the Reich. My engineers, I lit on the targets. Schneider's armaments in Le Creusot, aircraft plants in the southwest. But first, the crossing into occupied zone, where the demarcation line bristled with checkpoints like porcupine quills. The border trick was audacious, born of desperation. Hide beneath a locomotive tender on a goods train bound for Vichy. We oiled our way into the undercarriage at night, bodies wedged in the cold dust and grease, the iron beast shuddering to life at dawn. Hours of hell. Sparks flying like fireflies from the wheels, heat baking our backs, the rhythmic clack-clack a lullaby of doom. Milice patrols boarded at moulins, boots thudding overhead, voices barking for papers. I held breath, heart slamming, a rat in the walls. Clearance. Paris by noon, emerging black as miners from the yards, hailing a taxi with grins that fooled no one. Safe house. A widow's flat in the 15th, overlooking the Eiffel Tower's silenced lights. Rake awaited, his set humming in a false-bottomed valise, mustache waxed to Parisian perfection. London's eager, he tapped. Authenticator bravo. Send, Benoit arrived. Request targets. Weeks blurred into a tapestry of tension, dead drops in Luxembourg gardens, where leaves hid microdots, brush passes amid market crowds, a glance and a dropped glove the only exchange. I recruited sparingly, a mechanic at Citroën with grudges against the Bosches, a postman whose route skirted Gestapo outposts. Sabotage started small, surgical. Abrasives in the ball bearings of Messerschmitt engines at a Toulouse assembly line, slipped in by a contact posing as a welder. Sugar in the gears, I quipped, but the reports thrilled London, production halted, Luftwaffe grounded for days. Bigger. The Agusen Dam, that hydroelectric beast powering half the occupied zone. August heat wave, the Creuse River low and languid. My team, Rake on lookout, Alex nursing his limp, hiked the gorge under cover of a workers' picnic, rucksacks heavy with compositions sea-wired to clocks. The plant squatted like a concrete troll, turbines thrumming hymns to industry. Guards, Vichy gendarmes, half-hearted in their képi, more interested in wine than watch. We scaled the access road at midnight, moon veiled by thunderheads, the air electric with storm's promise. I led, stens slung low, pulse a metronome of dread. Perimeter wire snipped silent, then the transformer yard, bushings gleaming like silver teeth. Here, I whispered, pressing charges to the insulators, time pencils fizzing softly as acid bit copper. Calculations from Wanborough, overload the grid, cascade failure across the lines. Alex fumbled a detonator, sweat-slick fingers, but Rake's steady hand fixed it. Planted. Retreating, thunder cracked, masking our steps like an ally's artillery. Dawn brought the bloom, lights flickering out from Orleans to Tours, factories grinding to halt, U-boat pens in Brest plunged to dark. BBC crowed it as Allied action, but we knew hours of blackout, chaos in the wires. London, brilliant, power denied. Elation soured quick. 15 August, Rake and Alex nabbed in a Montmartre café, Gestapo swooping like crows on a kill. Tip-off, a barmaid's loose tongue, or worse. I watched from across the street, heart in vice, as they dragged them away, Rake's disguise torn, Alex's protests silenced with a rifle butt. Alone again, the noose of isolation tightening. Virginia's couriers kept the wireless alive, drops of supplies parachuted into the Haute-Loire, Bren guns, grenades, morphine for the morphine-addicted fear. I ghosted south, seeding more mischief, rails at Vierzon lifted with crowbars, troop trains delayed by hours. October's chill heralded extraction. A Lysander's whisper on a meadow near Provence, picked up with George's Dubudin, a fellow agent with eyes like a hunted fox. The pilot, a Canadian ace named McKay, taxied blind under blackout, our torches winking Morse, G for George. Airborne at last, France shrinking below like a crumpled map, I wept silent tears for Rake and Alex, their fate a shadow over the channel. Debrief revealed the worst. Tortured, but unbroken, Rake escaped Fresnes in 44, Alex endured till liberation. My MC came then, pinned in a quiet ceremony, the king's voice a rumble. For gallantry in the face of the enemy. Gallantry, survival more like, laced with the bitter aftertaste of friends lost. Winter in England was a forge, more training at Arisaig, Highlands rains lashing the hills as we drilled with commandos, amphibious raids on mock U-boat pens, garrots on dummies that bled sawdust. Parachute school at Ringway, jumps into the Irish Sea's chill embrace, silk billowing against gales that tested the soul. By March 1943, the third call, German now cleaner slate. Troyes Circuit, Baker Street said. Prosper's crumbling, Subtle's net too bold. You shore it up, blow the sheds. Prosper, Francis Subtle's ambitious web, pianos hiding transmitters, but leaks springing like sieves. My drop, 11 April, near Blois, with Denny's Barrett, Honor, wireless man with a poet's soul and a pistol's aim. The Loire Valley welcomed with spring's deceitful bloom. Orchards pink against the blue, but checkpoints bristling along the river. We landed clean in a spinney, containers thudding soft, met by Pierre Culioli's boat from the Prosper Fringe. Blois to Paris. Train rides under false beards, the city of light dimmed but defiant, trams rattling past barricades of sandbags. Subtle's flat in the 16th, a haze of cigarette smoke and urgency. Crystals for the sets, I handed over the pouch, gems that tuned the airways to London. His eyes, fever-bright, betrayed the strain, networks overlapping like veins, one cut and all bled. Watch the interconnections, I warned, but he waved it off, ambition's fire-blinding caution. Troyes was my forge, the orb's medieval heart, now a rail nexus feeding the Reichsmoor, safe house. A bookseller's loft above musty tomes, the scent of ink and intrigue. Recruits came cautious, Pierre Mulsant, a welder with fists like hammers and a grudge from 40, Yvonne Fontaine, courier with a dancer's grace and a widow's steel, her husband lost to Dachau. The Tinker Circuit, I named it after fairy mischief. We built slow, dead drops in the cathedral's cloisters, signals chalked on walls, cross for clear, circle for compromised. Weapons cached in a suburban villa, explosives molded in the basement, my hands remembering the putty's cool yield. Tension coiled like barbed wire. June raids, Prosper cracking, Subtle arrested 23rd, his lieutenants rounded up in a net of betrayal, Henry Dericourt, that enigmatic pilot, whispers of his Abuea ties. Troyes trembled, an informer fingered our arms dump. Evacuate, I ordered, Mulsant and I hauling crates under cover of a furniture van, sweat beading as gendarmes idled yards away. Yvonne's runs grew perilous. Microfilm in her corset, dodging patrols on her bicycle, once bluffing a miller's stop with a sob story of lost ration cards. Barrett's Morse clicked relentless, Tinker secure. Request detonators. Drops answered, Hudson's ghosting low over the Marne, silk mushrooms blooming in the night. The blaze, 3 July 1943, full moon a traitor overhead. Target. The roundhouse at Troyes Yards, 15 locomotives panting steam, tenders fat with coal for the front. Intel from a rail clerk, guards lax post-Provence landings, focused on Italy's pull. Team me Mulsant, 2 locals, Jacques the Ferrature, Yvonne on perimeter watch. We ghosted in at 200, workers' overalls grease-streaked, toolkits hiding limpet mines. The sheds yawned like iron caverns, echoes amplifying our breaths to thunder. Perimeter, snip the chain link, belly crawl through cinders that bit like ants. First engine, Pacific 231, boiler hot as Hades. I pressed the charge to the motion rods, time pencil set for 0400, fizz seal, Mulsant on the next, his whisper fierce, for my boy in the factory. 4 down, sweat rivers, then the glitch. A foreman's torch sweeping close, silhouette against the stars. Freeze, heart stop. The beam danced inches from Jacques' boot. Cheen errant, he muttered, a stray dog ruse, pebble tossed to distract. It worked light veered, curses fading. 6 more axles packed, cylinders stuffed with putty that would bloom to ruin. Wired we scarpered, Yvonne's bicycle bells tinkling false all clear. Dawn's grey herald, the first whoomp shook the earth, flames erupting like volcanic gods, boilers rupturing in chains of fury, orange hell licking the sky, 6 locos twisted skeletons, 9 more crippled in the inferno. Sirens wailed, Wehrmacht scrambling like ants from a boot. Chaos, the Orb Valley lit for miles, troop movements stalled for weeks. London crackled joy, Troyes triumph, Reich rails severed, but glory's ash, the crackdown followed. Informers multiplied, raids sweeping the orb. Barrett's set compromised, a frequency leak. We rotated ciphers, but paranoia gnawed. Yvonne's glances lingered too long, Mulsant's jokes turned barbed. September's harvest masked our exit. Lysander on a stubble field near Romilly, McKay's voice crackling, Germain, pile in. I went first, then the team in relays, Barrett and Mulsant November, Yvonne safe. Airborne France, a patchwork of scars below. I tallied the cost. Prosper shattered, hundreds arrested, but Tinker's spark endured. The flame tried me, but didn't break. One mission left, the Inferno's crescendo. Chapter 4. The breaking dawn, the blackout of England, felt like a benediction after the ceaseless glare of occupied nights, where every lamppost hid a spy and every shadow whispered Gestapo. It was early 1944, and I, Germain now, the name a talisman against the ghosts of Benoit, paced the dew-slick lawns of Beaulieu Abbey, that ancient Cistercian ruin turned SOE's final crucible. The fourth call had come like a thunderclap in March, Baker Street's summons pulling me from a brief idyll in the Cotswolds, where I'd courted a nurse named Elise, with tailies scrubbed clean of blood and betrayal. Brittany, the colonel said, his pipe smoke curling like invasion plans. Autogyro circuit, D-Day's shadow looms, cut the veins before the flood. Overlord was the word on every lip, though none dared speak it full. The great gamble, beaches from Normandy to the Cotentin, where boys from Iowa and Kent would storm the Reich's ramparts. My role, the saboteur's scalpel, slicing supply lines in Finisterre, that rugged Breton peninsula where Celtic winds carried the salt of freedom and the tang of peril. Training was a frenzy of refinement. Parachute drills at Ringway under floodlights that mocked the moon, jumps into the wind-whipped Solent where waves clawed at my harness like drowning hands. Sabotage labs at Station 12, the Friary, where I molded PE into shapes of doom, rail cutters that severed tracks like surgeons' shears, incendiaries that bloomed like Breton heather on fire. Wireless school honed my fist on the key, Morse's second language now, dots and dashes flowing like blood from a fresh wound. Interrogation refreshers in the cooler, where Klaus, the instructor ex-Gestapo, they whispered, plied the rubber hose with theatrical flair, his questions probing like fingers in a wound. Name your contacts, Germain, the woman in Troy's her name. I held, reciting pi to 100 places, the numbers a mantra against the pain that bloomed purple across my ribs. But the real trial was the mind. Visions of Rake's escape, Alex's endurance, Suttle's fall in Prosper's ruins. 4 missions, odds dwindling like sand through a detonator. The Hudson droned west on 5 April 1944, a moonless night over the Atlantic's black moor, my stomach a knot of hemp as the dispatcher strapped me in. Jump partner, Bob Malaubier, code Felix, a French-Canadian firebrand with a grin like a grenade pin and skills in demolition that rivaled my own. Containers packed tight, 50 kilos of PE, Bren guns for the Maquis, gold bars stamped with Victoria's profile. Soft as a kiss, lads, the crew chief joked, but his eyes said prayers. Green light over the Rance estuary, chutes blooming silent against the stars. We hit a pasture near Dinan, the earth soft from spring rains, rolling into gorse that tore at my woolens like vengeful thorns. Malaubier landed yards off, cursing in Quebecois as we gathered the silk and crates, burying them under quick turf. Footsteps in the gloom, autogyro, the challenge phrase Breton-tinged. Raypond, Eclair, our reception. Armel Gainalay, a fisherman with salt-crusted beard and eyes like chipped slate, his lorry waiting in the hedgerows. Les Boches thicken the ports, he growled, engine rumbling low. St. Malo crawls with U-boats. Brittany unfolded like a crumpled chart. Granite coasts battered by Biscay gales, inland moors where menhirs stood sentinel to forgotten gods, villages huddled against the chill where collaboration festered like kelp on the tide. The circuit hub, a miller's attic in Plowes-sur-Rance, the wheel creaking hymns below as Malaubier set up his B2 set, disguised as a butter churn. My cover, Jacques Leblanc, a Vichy engineer inspecting coastal defenses, papers forged with stamps that bore the patina of authenticity. First days blurred in reconnaissance, cycling coastal paths on rusted velos, notebook sketching pillboxes and gun emplacements under the guise of surveys. St. Malo's harbor bristled, e-boats nesting like wasps, cranes hoisting concrete for the Atlantic Wall, slave laborers in striped rags hauling girders under SS whips. The air reeked of tar and tyranny, gulls wheeling mockery over the swastika flags snapping in the wind. Recruitment was a Breton ballad of caution. Armel's cousins in the Maquis, hardy souls who knew the tours like their palms, grudges nursed since 40 when Pétain sold their souls for armistice. First link, Marie Picken, a schoolmistress in Dinan with a spine of oak and a network of schoolboys who ferried messages in their satchels. We met in the cathedral's nave, echoes swallowing our words as she unrolled a map filched from the commandante. The rail from Rennes to Brest, daily munitions for the TOT organization. Her finger traced the line, voice steady as sea chant. I pressed a sovereign into her hand, the gold warm as hope. For the books, mademoiselle. And the bombs, she smiled, fierce as a curlew's cry. Next, Yannick, a docker at Roscoff with arms like Horsa and a brother lost to the knacked, unnebbled decree. Over cider in a smoke-hazed tavern, he spilled the ledger. U-boat pens at Lorient, bunkered against bombers, but rails feeding them like veins to a heart. Sabotage the spurs at Guingamp, I urged. Delay the steel and the wolves starve. Tension coiled from the outset, a spring wound tight by D-Day's inexorable tick. Maze mists masked our first strike. The viaduct at Ploufragan, a steel span over the Trindade Gorge, artery for panzers rolling west. Intel from Marie's boys, guarded by a dozen Feldgendarmerie patrols hourly. Team. Me Malabia with his plastique poetry, two Maquis brothers from the hills, silent as mist. We moved at midnight, the 12th, moon veiled by clouds pregnant with rain. Bocage paths slick underfoot, boots sucking peat like reluctant confessions. The viaduct loomed, a iron lacework against the stars, river murmuring below like a conspirator. Perimeter. Wire cutters snipping silent, then the crawl, belly down on gravel that ground like teeth, Sten at the ready. Guards, 2 sentries pacing, cigarettes glowing like fallen stars. Malobia whistled, a fox's bark. Distract. I led the charges, PE packed into girders, detonators wired in series. My calculations precise, blast wave to shear the piers like a scythe through wheat. Rain pattered, masking the fizz of time pencils, acid-eating fuses like worry. 4 packs set, hearts drumming a Breton reel. Retreating, a sentry's beam swept close, too close, silhouette freezing us mid-stride. Halt, a guttural bark. Sten fire cracked, Malobia's burst dropping the shadow in a crumple. Alarm klaxons wailed, boots thundering from the far bank. We bolted, the gorge a black ally swallowing our flight, brambles tearing flesh like talons. Dawn's grey light revealed the triumph. The viaduct buckled, span plunging into the froth below, twisted metal screaming as panzers would have. Renbrest severed, Tots concrete delayed by weeks. London crackled, autogyro strikes true. Maury, elation was fleeting, chased by reprisals. Villages raised in the ord, hostages shot in squares, 50 for one dead Jerry, the posters screamed. Paranoia seeped like damp, a baker's glance lingering, a courier vanishing mid-run. Malobia's set went silent twice. Triangulation close, the B2s signal a beacon for the vans. We rotated lofts, codes doubled, but sleep fled on benzodrine wings, dreams of Carré's betrayal mingling with new phantoms. June's solstice brought the crescendo, D-Day -7, the air electric with invasion's breath. Targets multiplied. The arsenal at Concarneau, fish cannery turned munitions dump, rail yards at Quimper, engines idling for the counterstroke. The Concarneau hit was poetry in peril. Fog off the audit cloaking our approach, fishing smacks as cover. Yannick's dockers slipped us aboard at dusk, hulls creaking under crates of cod that hid PE and primers. Midnight drift into the harbour, oars muffled in burlap, the arsenal a squat fortress aglow with arc lights. Guards, Kriegsmarine in peaked caps, patrols on the quays. We beached silent, shadows melting into stacks of crates that reeked of gun oil and brine. Malobia led the wiring, incendiaries timed for 300, thermite to melt steel like butter. My role. The cutters on the pier rails, hacksaws biting silent under the stars. Sweat-strung eyes, hands blistered, but the math held. Charges placed, fuses lit. A patrol's boot scraped close. Yannick's knife found the throat, gurgle swallowed by waves. Away the smack slicing fog like a scalpel. Bloom at 300. Flames erupted, orange dragons devouring the dump, secondary blasts chaining like thunder, ammo cooking off in symphonies of ruin, the harbor a cauldron lighting the bay for miles. U-boat tenders aflame, cranes toppling like felled oaks. Chaos, shouts in German, searchlights stabbing blind, our escape in the conflagration's glare. Maquis cheers echoed from the hills, but cost. One docker winged, whispering farewells as we bandaged him in a cave. London, Arsenal ash, Overlord breathes easier. Quimper's yards were the anvil, 19 June, full moon, a reluctant witness, 15 engines corralled for evacuation east. Intel from Marie, guards doubled post Concano, dogs patrolling the sidings. Team swelled, 8 now Maquis with stens and grenades, faces blackened with cork. We infiltrated at shift change, posing as rail crew, tool carts veiling our loads. The roundhouse hummed, pistons hissing steam like serpents, the air thick with coal dust and diesel bite. Perimeter breached via a storm drain, effluent ankle-deep, stench a mask for our advance. I directed. Limpets on axles, PE and fireboxes, calculations for cascade failure, one blast igniting the chain. Malobia hummed a French lullaby, steadying nerves. Yannick's brothers covered flanks, eyes hawk-sharp. The plant, engines ranked like iron stallions, tenders brimming for the flight. First charge. Pacific 141, rods packed tight, fizz ceiling doom. 2, 3 sweat rivers, breaths ragged. Then the snag, a dog bayed, chain rattling alarm. Guards stirred, torches blooming. Main tenant, Sten burst, stitched the night, Maquis fire dropping 3 shadows. We pressed, 8 down the yard a tinderbox. Retreat fractured, dogs loosed, bullets zipping rails like hornets. Malobia took a graze to the leg, Yannick hauling him as we vaulted fences, brambles a gauntlet of thorns. The bloom, at 400, the earth quaked, flames roaring skyward, boilers bursting, fuel tanks erupting in geysers of fire, 15 locos a pyre that lit the Laita Valley, smoke pillar marking the kill for RAF spotters. Brest's garrison stalled, panzers idled, Overlord's path cleared by Breton fire. But the hammer fell, Gestapo sweeps, villages cordoned, torture chambers in Rennes echoing screams. Marie arrested 22 June, her school a raid's target. We learned later she broke not, dying in Ravensbrück's moor. Malobia's set compromised, a captured crystal matching his signal. Extraction urgent. Lysander fields scouted near Pontivy, Mackay's whisper the lifeline. 25 June, under rain-lashed skies, we piled in me last, glancing back at the miller's wheel turning indifferent. Airborne Brittany shrinking to emerald scars, I tallied the forge. Viaducts down, arsenals ash, engines scrap, Reich bled white in the west. London debrief, DSO pinned beside the MC, the king's grip firm. You set the blaze, Cowburn, Europe thanks you. Homecoming was ash and laurel, demob in 45, marriage to Elise in a Lancashire church smelling of damp stone and new beginnings. But the knights returned, flames in Troyes, viaducts falling, Marie's eyes fierce in the nave. I wrote it down later, the man who wouldn't break, truths veiled for the censors, but the weight lingered. 50-50 odds beaten 4 times, friends ghosts my constant guard. D-Day dawned without me, but my matches lit the way, Europe ablaze, as Churchill dreamed, from a tugboat engineer's steady hand. The war ended in Berlin's rubble, but for us SOE shadows, it flickered on in memory's unrelenting dawn. Epilogue, embers of endurance, the Lancashire rain fell in sheets, drumming a requiem on the slate roof of my cottage in the Ribble Valley, where the fells rolled green and indifferent under a sky the color of gunmetal. It was 1950, and I Benjamin Cowburn again, the codes of Benoit and Germain shed like snakeskin, sat by the hearth, a tumbler of whiskey sweating in my palm, its amber glow mocking the fire's feeble sputter. 5 years since VE Day's clamor, yet the war clung like damp wool. Nightmares of viaducts crumpling in Breton gloam, the acrid bloom of PE on Troy's rails, Marie Picard's eyes, fierce, unyielding, fading in Ravensbrück's frost. Elise stirred in the kitchen, her nurse's hands deft with stewpot and solace, our boy Thomas gurgling in his cot, oblivious to the ghosts at table. Demobilization had been a quiet unraveling. The DSO and MC pinned in Buckingham's hush, Churchill's not a benediction laced with sorrow. You've given more than most, Cowburn. Back to Civvy Street, Foster Wheeler welcomed me with open arms, blueprints blooming anew in Sheffield's sooty halls, but the precision felt hollow, valves sealing flow, not severing it. I wrote the book in 48, no cloak, no dagger, truths laundered for the official Secrets Act. The drops into Berry's black fields, the cat's velvet betrayal, Virginia Hall's limp defying Gestapo hounds. It sold modestly, readers devouring the daring-do, blind to the cost. The 50 agents rolled up in Prosper's fall, Rake's Fresnes scars, Alex's silenced Morse. France called me back in 46, a pilgrimage by Renault through liberated lanes, Paris reborn in neon and noise, the Seine cleansed of swastika silt. I traced old drops, Chateauroux's farmhouse rebuilt, Duval's stump traded for a prosthetic stride. Troyes yards humming with SNCF freights, no trace of our pyre. In Dinan, Armel Gainale poured Calvados by the harbour, his beard grizzled, voice thick. You lit the spark, Mon Army. The Maquis still toast autogyro. Malobia, ever the firebrand, met me in Montreal, his demo scars a map of shared madness, laughter chasing phantoms over poutine and plonk. Claire. A letter from Normandy in 47, married to a baker, 2 girls, forgiveness inked in careful script. You chose the fight, I chose peace. Thomas grew sturdy, kicking footballs in meadows where I'd once dreamed of turbines, not time pencils. Elise knew fragments, the limp from Pyrenees frost, the flinch at train whistles, but not the cyanide vial's cold kiss in my pocket, nor the faces memorized in crypts. SOE's reunion in 52 at the Dorchester. Survivors swapping yarns, the absent toasted in silence, Buckmaster's eyes wet behind his pipe. We set Europe ablaze, he quoted Churchill, but I saw the scorch, networks shattered, villages ash, the human ledger unbalanced. Nights by the fire, I ponder the odds, 4 missions, a tugboat frame defying the reaper. Was it luck, or the stubborn Lancastrian grit my father cursed in mill yarns? Europe healed. The Schumann plan weaving foes into federation, Paris aglow sans curfew. Yet embers glow, a newsreel of Korean hills, shadows lengthening anew. I raise my glass to the ghosts, Hymens in the bocage, Subtle's defiant grin, Marie's chalked signals. The flame endures, not in glory, but in the quiet forge of memory, where a boy's channel crossing birthed a man's unbreaking dawn.